Kesubos Daf Pei Gimel begins the 9th parak of the Masechta, parak concise, and the Mishnah begins by discussing what happens if somebody writes he doesn't want to have anything to do with his wife's property. His wife has property, nichse malog, that she brings to the marriage, and he writes, "Einli dinu dvarim, I have no claim on it." So Gemara says, what is the significance of it? And what does it prevent him from being able to take from it? So there are three main halachas. Number one, can he eat the peirus of the nichse malug? Can he get the usage out of it while they're married? Number two, once she dies, does he inherit it from her? And number three, if she sells it, does he have a claim to prevent and void that sale? So that would be the easiest thing. So the Gemara says the first case is, the minimum that he could say is, he says, Dinu dvarim einli b'nichsayich. He says, I have no claim on any of your property. So he still eats the peirus, because it's not a claim on the property, that's the peirus of the property. He still inherits it after she dies, because it's not her property anymore. The only thing that he can do, the only thing that he's giving up, is that if she sells it, he can't say that he wants it back. He can't prevent her from selling it, because he has no claim on it herself. Now, one level higher is if he says, he says, I have no claim on your property, or on their usage, or on their fruits. So now, not only is he have no claim to prevent her from selling it, he also can't eat the fruits, because he said, I don't have any claim on the fruits. However, when she dies, he still has a right to it. It's not her property anymore. He still has a right to inherit it from her. Now, Rabbi Yehuda here argues, and Rabbi Yehuda says, although he can't get the fruits of her property, that would be, let's say it's a field, the fruits that grow on the trees, but he could get the fruits of the fruits. So what he would do is he would take the fruits that grow in the field, turn that into Karen. He would do that by selling it and buying another field. And then he can take the fruits that grow on that field. That's called the fruits of the fruits. And that he has a right to do even in this case. And that he always has a right to do unless he spells out, I have no claim on your property or the fruits of the fruits until forever, down the line. Otherwise, at some point, you could always say, I'm taking this in order to get the fruits of the fruits of the fruits of the fruits. Now, the third level is if he writes, I have no claim on your property or on the fruits or on the fruits of the fruits, whether in your lifetime or after you die. Now he has no claim on anything. He cannot eat the fruits, he cannot prevent her from selling it, and he cannot inherit her. Now, the Rosh Gamliel disagrees, and he says even though it's a very valid lashon what he said, but he cannot prevent himself from inheriting, because the Torah gives him the right to inherit, cannot make a condition that violates the halacha of the Torah, and therefore it's meaningless and it's void. We now begin the Gemara, and the Gemara first of all makes the point that he doesn't have to write this anywhere where he says, Einli dinu dvarim, he says, I have no claim on my wife's property. He doesn't have to write that in the Kesubos, he can just say it. It's the same effectiveness. And the Gemara asks now, it should make a difference. Either way, it shouldn't be effective. Whether he writes it or he says it, somebody just says, I have no claim to something, that does not transfer the title of the property from him to someone else. If someone owns the land and he wants to give it as a gift to someone and he says, I have no claim on this, that doesn't make it the other person's. That's not a transfer. So how does it work here? He owned the peiros of this land, and now he wants to go and say, oh, I have no claim on it. So that's not going to transfer rishus. It still belongs to him. How does he have a right to transfer the peiros to someone else? Just by saying that. That's not something that's supposed to work. So in that, the Gemara explains that he said this while she's still in Arusa. That means before he actually gets any claim on the property in the first place, he says, I have no claim on it. That way, when she marries him, when they do Nisuin, he preemptively says that the kinyan that I'm supposed to get should not be chal. And this works because the kinyan is not automatic. If it was an inheritance that goes to him automatically, he can't prevent it. So then by saying, I have no claim on it, he doesn't accomplish anything. But where it's something that's coming to him from a different source, he could say, I am not going to stake my claim to it, and therefore I'm not going to allow it to be konui to me, and therefore it doesn't become his at all. Now, the Gemara says, that's like the opinion of Rav Kahana that says that somebody could say that. He could block the acquisition of something that's coming to him as long as it's not an inheritance. Rava says, there's another way that this becomes his, and that's that it's a takanas chazal that makes it his in the first place. It's an exchange for the mizonos. So he has a right to say, I don't want takanas chazal. He has a right to say, I opt out. Chazal did it for my benefit. I could say, I don't want it. And we see a similar concept. We see that Rav Huna says in the name of Rav that as far as the arrangement that Chazal made, that a man feeds his wife and she gives him her work, her income, she has a right to opt out of that because it was made for her benefit. So here also he has a right to opt out of this because this is made for his benefit. So the Gemara says, if that's true, that he could opt out of it, so then why do you have to say that she was an arusa? Even if he's an asua, and it's already his. It was given to him for his benefit, he could say, I don't want it, I'm opting out. So that, the Gemara says that he's not able to do that, because he has an equal ownership in this property that she does. She owns the guf, she owns the actual object itself, he owns the entire usage of it. So it's something that belongs to him. He can't just say, I'm opting out. Chazal were metakin that he should get it, but he has equal ownership rights in it, and therefore he no longer is able to just say, I don't want it. Now, that's what Abaye says, that he has equal rights. Rava says he has greater rights. And nafkamina between equal and greater here, the Gemara explains elsewhere, is nafkamina for a yavama. If he has a greater right, that means that when she's a shomeres yavam, nothing to do with our case, but in the case of a shomeres yavam who inherits, he has a greater inheritance over the property of a shomeres yavam than a regular husband would, and he has a greater hand in the property than she does. Now the Gemara goes back to the case that we mentioned earlier, where somebody wants to give someone else a gift. He wants to gift him a piece of land, and he says, "Dinu dvar mainly by, I have no claim on it." So now the Gemara asks, what if he did a kinyan with that? Is that going to work? Does that transfer rishos? He did a chalipin, he handed him a handkerchief. So the Gemara brings a machlek. Gemara says, according to Rav Yosef, the only thing that the handkerchief can do is to make the words that he spoke be more effective. The words that he spoke was that he doesn't have a claim. Great, so he doesn't have a claim. He still owns it. You're not going to change ownership by saying you don't have a claim. So you made it very loud and clear you don't have a claim, but that didn't change anything. Rav Nachman says no. When he says that he's doing a kinyan, he does transfer ownership, and he's transferring ownership. When he takes hold of the handkerchief, he transfers title of the property to the other person. Says Abaye, it's logical that which Rav Yosef was referring to is where the guy who gave the gift changes his mind right away, and now he protests and says, I never gave it. All I said was I don't have a claim on it, but I still own it. In the case where a few days went by, and now he comes and says, I want it back, I didn't really mean to give it, there, even if Yosef would agree that it's chal the kinyan when you did a kinyan chalipin, you can't back out on that. So now, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says that Meimer said the halacha is that the karka itself is transferred in this case. Rav Ashi said, is that talking about where he protested right away, or he protested a few days later? And he said, what do you mean? That's only a difference according to Rav Yosef. But I don't hold like Rav Yosef, and I hold that the transfer really takes effect, and therefore it's completely chal whether he transferred it right away, or whether he protested right away, or he protested later. The Gemara now asks, if we're saying that this lashon is effective, we said it's because he's an arusa, whatever it is, she's an arusa, whatever it is, but this language of him saying dinu dvarim is effective for him to give his rights away, and we said it's effective to the extent that he can no longer block her from being able to sell the land. So how come it's only effective in that way? If it's effective that he can give his rights away, then it should take away his rights to eat the fruits and his rights to get her inheritance. She should say he's able to remove himself, and he did. So how come he does not lose those two rights? So the Gemara offers two explanations of this. The Gemara first of all says, whenever you have a situation where somebody is trying to uproot the status quo, he only gets the minimum. Here we have an ambiguous language. We're not sure what's meant in the language. He says he's taking away something from himself. He says dinu dvarim. Didn't say what dinu dvarim, meaning what halacha. So she is trying to get his rights away from him. He has the rights to the Paris, to the Yerusha, and to block her from being able to sell it. She's trying to take that away by saying, I have a piece of paper where he wrote dinu dvarim. It's ambiguous terms, and therefore it's only worth the minimum. So the minimum of those three rights is the right to block her from being able to sell it. So therefore that's the only right that she gets to take away from him. So the Gemara asks, why is that the minimum right? There when he's blocking from being able to sell it, he's maintaining a hold on the entire property. That is something significant. You would think fruits would be less than that. Someone says, no, fruits is now. Fruits is he's eating the fruits, they're growing, they're here right now. That's more important. He would prefer to hold on to that than that if she wants to sell it, then one day he's going to lose it. That's a far off thing. So the Gemara says, so maybe he should lose the right of a Yerusha. Yerusha is not even ever going to happen. Yerusha is only, it makes a difference if she dies first. If he dies first, then Yerusha makes no difference at all. So he should lose the right to Yerusha, which is a smaller right than the right if she sells it. So Gemara says, no, Yerusha is more common than sale. sale, she doesn't often try to sell the property out from under them. And therefore, if he's trying to give something away, he's probably trying to give away the less common thing, not the more common thing. And then whereas second shot is that if you listen carefully to the words, the right that he's giving away is only the actual property itself. He says, I have no din dvarim in your property. And this is how we explain the Mishnah itself. He was not talking about the fruit, so therefore the fruits he still keeps, and he was not talking about after she dies. And therefore that right he still keeps. The property now itself, that right is giving away, and therefore he can't block her from being able to sell it. That's what he's giving away. Gemara now focuses on the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said the only way that he could actually write off his right to the fruits is if he says, I have no claim on the fruits of the fruits, forever. Meaning all the generations of fruits. So now the Gemara's question is, three possibilities. How exacting was Rabbi Yehuda in his language here? Is it enough if he says fruits of the fruits, or does he have to say forever? Is it enough if he just says forever and he doesn't say fruits of the fruits? Meaning, what if he says, I have no claim on the fruits forever? So then that's obviously referring to the fruits of the fruits of the fruits. And if he says, I have no claim on the fruits of the fruits, does he have to say forever? Obviously, he means the fruits and fruits forever. Or does he have to say both? And either one is no good. So we have three possibilities. One, it's enough to say the fruits of the fruits, and you don't have to say forever. Two, it's enough to say the fruits forever, and you don't have to say fruits of the fruits. Or three, you have to say both of them. So Gemara asks, according to each one, why would we say something different if he doesn't have to say it? Why would the Mishnah use this language if it's not true? So the Gemara goes to it one at a time. So the Gemara says, first of all, if you want to say that he only has to say fruits of the fruits, then why does the Mishnah say forever? So the Gemara says, no, what it means to say is that he just has to say the fruits and the fruits of the fruits, and that's clear to mean for generations. The fruits of 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 the fruits. It doesn't have to say that at all. The phrase ad olam, forever, just means to show you that phrase we can figure out on our own. It means continuing. So says Gemara, now on the other side, that he only has to say forever. So why does it say the fruits of the fruits? Let him just say the fruits forever. So Gemara says it could be that that's enough, but the reason why it said the fruits of the fruits forever is to show you that if you would just say the fruits of the fruits is no good. Fruits of the fruits itself is not enough. He has to say, if he's saying fruits of the fruits, he also has to say forever. That's why it says forever here, but really just forever without fruits of the fruits would be enough. So then the Gemara says, now on the third side, that you have to say both of them, the fruits of the fruits forever. Why would I need both phrases? Why is one of them not enough? So Gemara says, if you would just say fruits of the fruits, so then I would think that it stops there. I would think it's only fruits of the fruits, but not the fruits of the fruits of the fruits. And therefore you have to say forever, which means for all generations. And if you just say the fruits forever, then I would just mean that the fruits for all time. For all time and not for all generations of fruits. I would not understand that you mean all generations of fruits. Therefore it has to say the Paris and the Peri forever. So that's how the Gemara is explaining all three possibilities, how they make sense. Gemara now asks, what if a person says an interesting phrase? He says, I have no claim on your property or on their peiros, the fruits of the fruits. He doesn't say anything about the peiros themselves. So what does that mean? That means that he's allowed to eat the fruits? He's just forbidding himself the property and the peiros? Or does it mean also the peiros themselves he's not allowed to eat? So Gemara says, well, obviously he can't eat the peiros, because if he eats the peiros, how's he ever going to have peiros? Versus what kind of question is that? Even in Rabbi Yehuda, where he talked about the peiros and the peiros, he's allowed to eat the peiros and he's allowed to eat the peiros unless you say otherwise. How is that ever going to happen? If he ate the peiros, he's not going to get peiros. So you should have the same question. Obviously, the answer to that is that he ate peiros, but he left some over that he could sell them and buy land and grow peiros from that. And therefore, it's not a problem. Here also could be referring to the same thing. The Gemara now goes to the opinion of Shimon ben Gamliel. Shimon ben Gamliel says, even if he says a lashon that he's not inheriting, he inherits anyway because the Torah said he does, and he doesn't have a right to mess with that. A tanai that he makes against the Torah is not chal. Says the Gemara, what's the halacha? Rav said the halacha is the same as what Shimon ben Gamliel said, but not for the same reason. The Gemara says, what does that mean? So the Gemara's first attempt to explain it, which is what we'll get to on this stuff, is that the halacha of Shimon ben Gamliel that he does inherit her. He cannot prevent himself from inheriting the land. However, not for Shimon ben Gamliel's reasoning. Shimon ben Gamliel's reasoning was because you cannot make a tanai, you cannot say that you're not keeping the Torah's halachas. The Torah says the husband inherits his wife, and there's nothing you can do about it. However, Rav is saying for a different reason. Really, you could make such a tanai. You could say, I don't want that right that the Torah is giving me. However, Here you can't, and that's because this is a dirabanan, says Rav. Rav Shimon Gamliel held that the Yerusha of a husband is a diraisa. Rav Shimon Gamliel is saying, Rav is saying that it's a dirabanan, and the Chachamim made a dirabanan stronger than a shaltair in order to make sure that people are not mezalzel in it, and therefore that you cannot go against. This is a sugi we've had earlier in the Masechtas. Now the Gemara is going to go into if Rav really holds that way, and we'll discuss that on the next daf.